What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Nerdz Enigma Podcast, powered by sportsnerds.com. I'm your host, Josh Petrie, and today we have a very special guest, a unanimous All-American while at Michigan State, two-time first-team All-Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year, and second overall pick in the 1989 NFL Draft by the Green Bay Packers, and somebody who now enjoys photography on the side as well, and a man who has lived 1,000 lives of ups and downs and lived to tell the tale, Tony Mandarich. Tony, what's going on, man?
Not much, Josh. It does seem like I've lived 1,000 lives.
It does. I appreciate it, and you're an inspiration to a lot of people. So
I appreciate that.
So I want to start off. We'll go through your career from pretty much from the beginning. But I want to start off by asking you about this gentleman right here, not Steve Urkel, but Nick Saban. He recruited you in college, and he gave you the endorsement of saying that you were the greatest offensive lineman that he's ever been around. So as a kid, especially, like, what does that mean to you as somebody like of his stature?
Well, I mean, it means a lot. I mean, like you said, Nick recruited me to come to Michigan State to play right out of Ohio, because I spent my senior year in Ohio. And, what you see of Nick now is a Nick with a lot more experience, but the core foundation of Nick is the same as it was 40 years ago. It's about fundamentals. It's about discipline. It's about doing your job, listening to the quarterback or whatever the thing is. It's really simple stuff, and then putting it all together. So that's just been obviously exponentially, made so much louder because of his accomplishments with, I think, 7 national championships.
Mm-hmm.
But he was really the same guy. And I mean, he's not the same guy, but he was at the core, I would say, the same guy.
Early in his career like that, because I know now, after all those years of coaching, it's a lot of people like to say he's coming out of his shell a little bit, and he likes to have, a good time, unlike he did before. So what was he like early in his career? Was he still, a hard-nosed guy early like that?
He was. I mean, he was hard-nosed. Now, keep in mind, I'm offensive line, so I'm on the offensive field during practice. He's on the defensive, and we had a yeller as a coach, Coach Buck Nystrom, who is a legend. And he would, yell and scream and all that stuff. But sometimes we would stop because Nick would be yelling so loud at the DBs for stuff. I mean, for things that he had every right to be upset for, not knowing the coverage. And I mean, that's why you're here, right? To get an education and to play football. And so when he would go off on one of his rants, like, we would stop because it was so loud, and we would just sit there and kind of turn our heads and watch. And then when it was done, we'd get back to playing, practicing football. But there was definitely moments where he wasn't always like, strict and straight and narrow. I mean, he would joke around and stuff, but when it was time to work, it was time to work.
So talk to me about the Rose Bowl in 1988. And it's funny too, because yesterday I just talked to Eugene Napoleon, who was on the WU team that made it to the national championship against Notre Dame in 1988. And I talked to him about the nerves. So tell me about the nerves for you coming out for the Rose Bowl.
It was interesting. It was, the quote unquote granddaddy of them all. And it was always Big Ten versus Pac-10. And now, that's been so convoluted and changed.
Right.
But we had played USC in the season opener at Michigan State. And I remember George Perlis, our head coach, after we won that game, and we won that game pretty handily, he had said, "Don't be surprised." He goes, "If we play that team in the Rose Bowl at the end of the year." And we were kind of like, I mean, that's quite a, prediction, but then it happens. So, the nerves weren't as bad because we had already played them. We already knew their personnel. The guy I was going to play against was the same guy I played against. And, you do the same things. You prepare, you kind of look at that. We looked at that film from the first game so many times to see what we did well and what we didn't do well and what they did well, how they disguised things, all those things. But, the nerves weren't as maybe if we were playing a different team, maybe I would have been a little bit more nervous, but you get a little bit of confidence because you know what to expect from these guys.
Right. So talk to me about being the, named to the All-Madden team still in college, where I know you were the first to be named to that, but were you the last to be named to the All-Madden team while still in college?
As far as I know, yes. As far as I know, I'm the only college player to be on it. And the whole premise behind the All-Madden team is, kind of the little grittier guy that gives the extra shove at the end, yet you still got to be a good player, right? You can't, because there's a lot of guys that will give the extra shove, but they don't start. But and then when I look at the list of all the players on that team, the year I was added to that, I mean, they're legends, right? I look back and I go, wow, that guy was awesome. That guy was awesome. Some of the names you forget. But for me, it was a great honor. I mean, I was very humbled by it, and even now, looking back, I mean, I'm humbled by it.
So talk to me about, when it came time to come out, and I say that term loosely. I say draft experts loosely. Said that they thought that your pass blocking may have been hidden a little when you came out due to the fact that Michigan State ran the ball so much. So what do you say? I mean, what do you say to that?
Um,
I mean,
I
can you confirm that yes, and that may somewhat be the case, but you were still a football player.
Yeah, you're still a football player, and if you're going to get drafted that high, you better be able to adjust. Um, but yeah, I mean, we were a run, 80% of the time, and out of the 20% of passing, 10% of that was probably play action. So it was kind of like faking a run. But that, I mean, I never used that as an excuse for the pass blocking. The Green Bay years, I like came into Green Bay with my, already shooting myself in the foot with the, abuse of the adult beverages and the pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals meaning, painkillers and stuff. Everybody thought it was a PED thing, and it wasn't. It was, which I was fine with because it was a distraction to the adult beverages. Everybody was looking left. And at that time, I was kind of like, okay, this is great because the stuff I'm really doing is over here on the right. And so that was, I mean, those 4 years were rough. Green Bay is a great town. It's obviously a great organization. I mean, I made so many mistakes in Green Bay that looking back, it's like, no, I wouldn't change anything because I learned from all that. So.
Right. So I want to talk to you also about like the combine, it being, a hair short of 6'6" and 330, because I cover the Falcons for the Athlon Report, and I talked to TJ Duckett a while back. Used to be a running back for the Falcons, and
Yeah.
we talked about his combine, and he was a big back at 6 foot. I think he was 260, and I think he ran 4.445. But I look at you at your size and height, and I think you ran a 4.6. Like, to me, that's crazy. So what was behind all that? How'd you get that body moving so quickly?
Well, and I will say kudos to TJ Duckett because he's a Michigan State guy.
Right.
Knowing that the combine was coming up, knowing that these things are, knowing that there's going to be a broad jump, a vertical 225 test on the bench, 40-yard dash. I specifically trained in the last 6 months or last 4 months before once the season ended. I specifically trained for each one of those things. So when I trained for my 40, I trained with the Michigan State track coach because I didn't need to start a 40 out of a 3-point stance like a football player. I needed to start it like a 100-yard sprinter. So, and just the little tweaks that they made and helped me learn that stuff made a lot of money because it helped with my speed. I was always fast, but I think that probably shaved maybe 2/10 of a second off of 40. So I probably would have ran like a 4.8, but training with that coach and obviously, stretching, just doing all things so you're more limber. I think that really helped me about a 1/10 or 2/10 of a second off my 40.
Are you still the record holder for the 39 reps of 225?
I never was the record holder.
Okay.
A lot of people assume that.
That's a crazy number.
Yeah, I mean, I did 39. I think the record was already like 50, so like 52 or 54. I think it was maybe Mike Ruth from Boston College.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, 39 is respectable. The 40-yard dash, I say I still hold the record, but they won't recognize it for 2 reasons because they're saying these 2 reasons. I find it amusing because it was all clocked on a hand stopwatch. Okay. And although there was 40 people clocking it, right. And the fact that it was a pro day at Michigan State instead of run at Indianapolis at the combine. So, I'm like, well, I'm not going to sit there and argue about who has the fastest 40, but if anybody ever asks me, I'm going to say, yeah, I do. Cause I haven't seen an offensive lineman run a faster one yet in the combine. And then, people get into that whole, debate about, well, it's not laser. And so I'm like, okay, so did Deion Sanders does not count? Did Darrell Green's not count?
Right.
These guys were cooking, right?
So talk to me, you're in the league and you get the, everybody knows the incredible bulk Sports Illustrated cover, but did that start your love of photography? And I also wanted to, it's kind of a two-part question because I wanted to ask you too, if that started your love of photography, and also it didn't really register for you of how big of a deal that was until you saw it on shelves at the airport at LAX too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the photographer back then, obviously there weren't digital cameras. It was all like regular film cameras. And he was, doing test shots with Polaroids and all this. And he said, okay, we've got the composition, everything set up the way we want. And he's like, we just got to wait like about 10 or 15 more minutes for the sun to go down a little bit. So I asked him, I said, can I see the Polaroid, the test shot, just so I have an idea of what it looks like? Well, I mean, I know how I was standing on the rocks, so that wasn't a surprise, but how he shaped the light with modifiers and with strobes and with natural light is what blew me away, because what he showed me in the Polaroid looked nothing like it did to the naked eye when you were standing there. And so that's what really kind of piqued my interest in a very serious way. Now, I didn't continue it really till late 90s when I became a serious hobbyist, and then in 05 became professional. So that was the like thing that was a catalyst for the photography. And then, no internet. SI is at that time, the print authority in sports. ESPN's probably the media, like TV media authority. There was no internet. So I was at the LAX because I was living out there for 9 months in Cali. And, back then it wasn't like airports are now, where they're like almost like shopping malls. Back then it was like you have a corner store, you can get some water, a bottle of water, you can get a newspaper or whatever. But then the whole thing, the whole top shelf around the whole store was that issue next to each other, like probably 50 of them. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, are you kidding me? Like I was like, that's kind of cool. But I didn't realize, I started to process things like, there's a lot of people that walk through this airport, and then you start to just exponentially go bigger and bigger and go, oh my gosh, like this is like, we'll see how this goes.
Right.
So it was interesting, to say the least.
So I know that you made the comment, I think you said at some point, I don't know if it was on the record or not, that you thought the only road to the NFL was through steroids. Was that a quote on record, or was that just something that you and your brother, you said that you guys thought?
I mean, I've said it in interviews before, so I guess that would be the record. I never said, like, I never had made that statement to say off the record.
Mhm.
But my brother and I did think that. And, and to give you some context of where we were, Steelers just won 4 Super Bowls in the last 6 years of the 70s. And they were all, big,
Right.
strong dudes. And it was obvious they were pushing people around at will. So that's really why we thought that. And, my brother's 5 years older, but so, there's some influence there because he's my older brother. I don't blame anybody or nobody ever made me do it. I chose to do it. And, but really that was the mindset. And I was like, if you're going to get to the NFL, you have to do this. And I had to have that moment where I asked myself, am I willing to do this? And, obviously I decided, yes, I am.
So I know you've also made the comment that, on a few shows that you thought your time in Green Bay was sort of a train wreck, but you regret nothing. You would take none of it back. And I think, were you on Letterman while you were at Green Bay? Was that something that?
Letterman was right around the draft. So I think Letterman was like 1 or 2, maybe 3 weeks after the draft, because he did talk about the Green Bay had drafted me already. And then the whole Tyson thing was happening, like so, I was like, well, I'm going to use this as a negotiation thing, right? To kind of speed up the negotiation with the pack. And although the Tyson thing was a real thing, they came to us. Like, actually, it wasn't Tyson's team. It was a group of promoters came to us and said, hey, would you even be interested in something like this? And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I'll listen to what you have to say. And then I was like, sure, if I don't want to sit for a full year and not play football because we were so far apart with negotiation, I said, well, let's start figuring out if we can do this.
So I know, like I said, you thought there was a lot of negative in your time at Green Bay, but give me some of the good moments, some of the things you look back on that you really enjoyed and that is really memorable for you, outside of all the negative things.
The loyalty of the fans is just incredible. Even, and we weren't like some of the teams that Brett Favre ended up having, and like 11-5, 12-4, like for years. We were a 10-6 and 9-7, and fans would still show up, man. It could be raining, it could be whatever. And then wherever you went in town, fans were just like, they just loved you. I mean, they supported, they wanted, they would say their 2 cents and they would leave you alone. And they'd be like, hey, look, I know we're going through a rough season, but just so you guys know, we love you and we support you. And it's like, I didn't get that anywhere else, not just me, but other players from Green Bay. That was not a common thing with fans. So the fans were incredible. I got to mention my rookie year, we played Chicago at home, and one of the funnest moments was when Mikowski threw that touchdown to Sterling in the end zone, and they had to review it for 15 minutes because they thought Mikowski crossed the line of scrimmage, and then I even think Chicago has an asterisk by that game for themselves, but it was that crowd and just that whole time was just incredible. Like that moment was incredible. But other things off the field stuff, like the snowmobiling up there was awesome, and the people were awesome. I was never big into fishing, but boy, the little fishing huts on the bay were just like overnight. There'd be like 1,000 of them, which was kind of interesting. And I mean, I grew up blue collar family, middle class, and the people in Wisconsin and are like that. So I could relate quite a bit to that.
So when you get to Green Bay and you show up in the locker room and you're a big guy, you're jacked, you're coming in as a rookie and things like that. And I know athletes are a lot of them are creatures of habit. So when you got to the locker room, did you feel challenged by any of them, or was there any jealousy with some of them, or how did that go?
I didn't feel any jealousy immediately.
Well, I meant on their part. Did they?
Right. No. That's what. Yeah, and that's what I'm referring to. Not immediately. I mean, everybody was pretty much very accommodating, very welcoming. But I will say, even halfway through that season, it was pretty evident that there were people that didn't like me, even people on the offensive line. And I mean, that's okay. You don't have to like everybody. I don't like everybody. And it's, if you like everybody, you haven't met enough people.
That's what makes the world go around, I guess.
Right. But, I think one of the cool things about me being the first lineman to kind of crack the 7-figure mark per year is the next year, all the players that were in the league that were renegotiating, or some of them Pro Bowlers and stuff, they got paid. And I feel, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say this is a fact, but I feel that me breaking the ceiling on that helped those guys in the future.
So I want to also talk to you. I want to touch on the rehab stint. A lot of people like to focus on pro athletes like, Ryan Leaf and Johnny Manziel. Jamarcus Russell's on a whole other level. I don't know what was going on with him, but a lot of people only like to focus on the negative. So, but what was it for you that clicked for you when you were in rehab? And because you've completely, changed your life and you're so humble now and you've turned things around. So where was that moment that clicked for you? Because I know you had a time when you looked in the mirror and you were just pretty much sick of the BS and things like that. So was that it, or was there one moment?
It was that, so there was 2 moments. That was one moment that you just described. That's kind of the moment I had 3-4 days before I decided to go to treatment.
And that's what I say too. It just bothers me that nobody wants to talk about the comeback. Everybody wants to focus only on the negative.
Well, yeah. I mean, that tells you a lot about people. Although, there'll always be naysayers. And if you don't give them any attention, they'll move on to the next person they can criticize. So, but that was one moment. The second moment was 11 days into the rehab. I only stayed 17. 11 days. I started laughing again, which was like a core gut laugh, right? And it was the first time I'd laughed like that probably in 10 years, and I forgot about that feeling, and so that really was kind of kind of digging my hooks into whatever's happening and whatever's working. I want to hang on to this, and because I really thought the fun was over, And little did I know it was just about to begin.
Right. So talk to me about your book. I know you've written a book called My Dirty Little Secrets. Tell me about that. Plug it for me and let everybody know
Sure.
about your book.
Yeah, you can best place to get it is on Amazon, and wrote it in 2009. It was, with that book, it was the first time I kind of went public with admitting that of the steroid use. And what prompted was I think Inside the NFL, kind of like mini documentary with Armagetayan, where we talked on camera about it. But the book is a very easy read. It's only like 200 pages. It's very raw, and it literally takes you through the timeline of everything. And ironically, I have one sitting here, but this is
Okay.
obviously, you can see a promotion copy, but it it takes you through a very raw what happened, like literally, because there's a lot of parts, there's chapters in there that people won't even know about, like that they're like, I had no idea about this. And part of the reason they don't is because of what you had pointed to earlier. They're so focused on bringing out the negative things you did that they don't take a chance to step back and be like, okay, let's look at the complete story. But I think it's a good book. It's a good cautionary tale for athletes, kind of maybe specifically because I was an athlete, but for really anybody can relate to it. Soccer mom could relate to it if she had a problem with, chemicals.
Also enjoyed the quote that you gave about the book. You said you didn't write it for forgiveness. You wrote it. You wrote it in hopes of somebody going through things like that would see the light.
Yep, exactly. And to the point of, that's why I have no regrets for all the mistakes, because who I am today, I'm good with.
Right. So I got a couple more questions for you. And I'll get you out of here. But I also want to talk. Obviously a collector of many things, ball cards and everything else. And you were within that junk wax era of all those ball cards being mass produced, and you've got all kinds of rookie cards out there, and I've got a boatload of them. So how many rookie cards have you been sent to have signed and you send back?
I I couldn't even. I mean, I couldn't even guess a number. I
Because
couldn't
that's
even.
what I'm saying. Where they're so mass produced and just
Right,
so many of, I can only
right.
imagine how many that you've
I
been asked
probably,
to
like,
sign.
even like, so today, what, 36 years removed from the draft. I probably get a minimum of two pieces of mail a day for autographs, and sometimes it'll be 10 pieces, like
Right.
in one day. It's just, it'll come in waves, but almost every day at least two pieces of mail. And part of me is like, I'm grateful that people still want the autograph, right? It's like, it's not an ego thing. It's just kind of like, okay, well, there's people that are interested and that know the whole story. Because why would you want an autograph from somebody that you dislike? You wouldn't, right?
Right.
You would want it from somebody that you at least were a fan of or still are a fan of, or whatever. So yeah, it's still active.
So one thing I like to wrap the interview up by asking everybody the same question is, what is something that you want people to know about you that they may not?
That they may not.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, I would say faith, but people know that. I would say, I mean, what they probably don't know is that, like, I love to cook. I'd say 99% of my meals I make at home, and just recently, I started making sourdough bread at home without the yeast and all the bad stuff in it. Because I love
Hmm.
bread, but I won't eat bread that makes you feel bloated. So I started making my own sourdough, which there's a recipe and there's a whole technique on how to do it. And it takes like a day and a half to mix it all up and do all this stuff. It's a long process, but like, stuff like that interests me. It's I don't do it with a big old chef hat on or anything.
Right.
But
You do it with an apron? You get an apron?
no, no. Usually it's after the gym. I got like shorts on and like my
Yeah.
workout, and
I
I'm
didn't know
like,
if you had an apron that said like "kiss the cook" or something like that. You never know.
I probably should get one.
Yeah, you should get you one. I'm sure there's plenty out there that say all kinds
Right?
of things. But look, man, I
That's probably,
appreciate you coming on and
yeah,
taking time out of your
yeah,
busy day. And
100%.
like we talked about on TikTok, I thought for sure when you were asking on TikTok what's your favorite Guns N' Roses song is, I thought for sure I was like, man, it's got to be Civil War because that's mine. But unfortunately, it wasn't.
I
So
love it, but it's not. I do love
yeah,
that song, but yeah, Rocket Queen is my favorite. It was the last song on side B.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so
Right.
much, and I hope to do it again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, buddy.